Hello all. So we're going to look at Rosenshine's principles. And what Rosenshine's principles do is they look at research on information processing, on memory, and they combine it with what teachers do in their lessons to have the most impact upon students' learning. So it's really a way of ensuring that we are all evidence-informed practitioners, and the strategies we use, and there's no doubt that you will use these in your lessons, but it's really helpful to see what theories underpin these principles and perhaps consider what areas of these ideas we might want to consider and stress and focus on this year. So Rosenshine's principles, there are 10 principles, and those 10 principles really fall under 4 key headings. And one of the first key headings is sequencing concepts and modelling. So 10 principles, but they sit under 3 headings. So with sequencing concepts and modelling, under this heading, the first key thing is about presenting new material to the students in chunks, really small chunks, very small pieces of information. Present new material in small chunks or steps. And what has to happen after each step is some practice or retrieval of that information. So new material, a little bit of practice after each step. This is because our working memory, which is where we process all of the information, is incredibly small. So we can only handle a very few amount of material or information. We can only handle a very small amount. Too much confuses the students. So chunked with practice after each step. So for example, if I was going to introduce a new theory, they'd mix and match 4 terms, match them up, go through them, check they understood them. Then we discuss the theory. Then they do like a brain dump on the whiteboard, brain dump it all. Small chunk with a little bit of practice after each step is really critical. It prevents cognitive load, is the point of it. So the second is students must be provided with models or worked examples. So this is when we think aloud and we explicitly narrate what we would do in terms of steps to deal with an exam question, how we approach an assignment. So models where we explicitly narrate how to approach something. And these are really important because they provide the students with a lot of cognitive support. So the material is chunked with practice after each stage, after each chunk. And then they're also provided with models to help with any cognitive processing as well. The third is providing scaffolding for very difficult tasks. So again, we've got it chunked with practice. We've got models or worked examples of how to approach the item, how to approach an assignment. And then the third is providing scaffolding for difficult tasks. So as you can see, it's temporary support that can be used to help the learner. If we're doing a crossword, all of the words are on the board. Helps people with dyslexia, particularly because it's very, very frustrating if you know the word but you're not spelling it correctly for the boxes. Or again, you're providing a peel model, or you're saying with this criteria, this is what we've got on the board, 2 pieces of legislation, a link to a case study. Chunking, modelled or worked examples, scaffolding for difficult tasks, all under the heading of sequencing and modelling. So I normally do to obviously illustrate this, it's a Neopod to help, but I'm not going to work with a pre-recording here. Okay, questioning. We've done a lot of work on questioning, but obviously it's identified to be one of the key areas that can really help students in a lesson. So most effective teachers ask a lot of questions to all the students and have really effective wait time. It's important that perhaps the focus is that we ask the question to the room and then we wait for students to be called upon. So we want to consider asking the question to the room and then waiting 10 seconds. Quite a lot of the very contemporary research is suggesting that's really important for thought ratio. Why ask Gemma what 37 times 46 is when you can ask the room what 37 times 46 is. Wait 10 seconds. And then call upon the answers. The evidence suggests the more learners that are thinking, the better the outcomes will be. And the whole point of questioning is it allows teachers to determine how well the material has been learned and if there's need for any additional instruction. So kind of a real thing with the Rosenshine's principle is reteach where necessary. Under this heading, it's also about checking student understanding of every single learner. So we've got our sequencing, chunking, modelling, scaffolding. Then we've got questioning, lots of questions, lots of wait time, but checking the responses of every single student. So using whiteboards, you just wanted to check they all understood what this was going in this assignment, what we mean by this legislation, what we mean by this artist. You have to check the responses of all students. So the best way to do that is generally whiteboards, but we wouldn't let them jump out of a building had we not have checked every single one of their parachutes was correctly done, because obviously the results would be catastrophic if they didn't. So a lot of what's saying is we have to check the responses of all learners all the time, and whiteboards are very, very, very good at that. This means that when they learn material, they're doing it with fewer errors, and it gives them lots of processing time. So if we're checking all of their learning, we're using their whiteboards, they're having time to process, and they're much more likely to have fewer errors, because you can check the errors and you can get rid of any misconceptions because you've checked everyone. Again, if this was live, I'd get you to do some brain dumping here just to stop you getting a cognitive overload as well, but we'll carry on. Okay, practice or stages of practice. Guided practice is when the students are given time to rephrase, to elaborate, to summarise the new material they've been given. And this has to happen long before they do any application to the exam, any application to assignments. So material is forgotten unless there's sufficient rehearsal of it. Findings from information processing suggests that students have to spend time with that new material, rephrasing it, elaborating, adding examples, matching things up. They have to practice that new material, otherwise it will be forgotten. And new material has to be played with or practiced in order to store it into our long-term memory. So all initial practice with that new information has to be guided first, has to be on whiteboards, has to be adding, elaborating, summarising. And this ensures that all initial practice has very minimal misconceptions and it generates lots of success. So students doing it, they've done it on whiteboards, you've checked, it's happy, it's appropriate, it works, and it helps build their confidence. And when knowledge is automatic, they're much more likely to be able to use that material for comprehension and application. So it's helping them process it so they can then use it more effectively. So this way they can obtain, which is number 7, is a really high rate of success. It's correct, it's clear, it's accurate before they ever put kind of pen to paper or they start typing up an assignment. After lots of guided practice, regardless of whether we teach vocational or A-level, then independent practice. And in the independent practice, this is when teachers monitor the learners as they start. So they're doing that independent task, writing up the bit of the assignment, doing an exam question. But it's really important that teachers monitor learners when they begin an independent task. So they may have their whiteboards in front of them. They've just done that guided practice quite a few times throughout the lesson. They've done one last really good bit of guided practice on their whiteboards. So the plan for the assignment's in front of them. They're clear about what they're doing, but teachers still monitor them as they start that initial independent task. And again, check for errors. This means, to be honest, your marking is therefore massively reduced because you know what they're writing in the assignment because you can see on their whiteboards is accurate. And as they've started it, you've made sure any misconceptions have long gone before you even get them to write it or even mark it. So it means that your marking is reduced, there's less errors, so they're much more fluent before they've done this and before they've done the independent tasks. Again, I'd get you to do some retrieval here, but we're going to just skip past this. Right, reviewing material is the fourth heading under which the last two criteria sit. This is about retrieving ultimately. So again, from Rosenshine's principles, and the research suggests that daily review, that each lesson begins with a short review of previous learning. And there's always a weekly, monthly review as well. And again, this is because when knowledge is more automatic, students can devote much more attention to complex scenarios, complex assignments, complex exam questions. If they still can't retrieve the information because they're not reviewing it constantly, they're not going to be able to use it effectively. And although we do associate reviewing much more with our A-level courses or the ones that currently have exams, obviously we are all moving towards that model. So review in the start of the lesson and monthly, weekly reviews are really important. But it also is, if they can retrieve it easily in our vocational courses, they can apply it much better. They can use the material in much more complex application. So those are the 10 principles under the 4 key headings. We're going to ask you in your faculties to decide which 2 of the principles you want to focus on, and myself and the coaches will come in and do some more bespoke inset on them. You can also use these to help inform your triangles, but a lot of the evidence is suggesting this is a really good model to recap over. Again, there's no doubt we do a lot of these in our lessons already, without doubt, but it is helpful to just see where we might want to review and tweak our practice. We are the sector of continual professional development. Okie dokie. Thank you very much, folks.